Welcome back to the show. Today's episode, we've got a couple topics I want to talk to you guys about. These are less about specific nutrition things and a little bit more about life, leadership, and more on kind of the how do you architect your life for success. And so there's just a couple things that I've been thinking about quite a bit lately, and a lot of it just kind of has to do with just kind of this season that I'm going through. This year has been, it's been an interesting year. I've learned a lot. There's been some really great things. There's been some bumps in the road. There's been a lot of learning. And so I just kind of want to share a little bit of the perspective that I've gained myself, and also just some things that I've heard from other people this year that really kind of resonate with me right now that I think you guys will get a lot of just insights from. So the first one is, you've got to make decisions conducive to your goals. And that sounds really simple and easy, but the best perspective that I heard about this, with relation to how I think about it, as I was listening to a podcast with a couple NBA guys, it was Paul George and Draymond Green, and it was on Paul George's podcast, but they're kind of talking about their careers, and this was in the context of somebody asked them like, hey, do you love your job as an NBA player? And Draymond said, I love basketball more than anything, like maybe even more than my family or something like that. Or maybe he said the only thing I love more than basketball in life is my family. But he said like it is the most important thing in my life outside of his family. But he hates the job. He hates being an NBA player. And it was specifically around everything that doesn't have to do with basketball. And he made some really interesting points. But then the thing that I thought was the most interesting about what he was talking about was he said, a lot of people will come to me and be like, hey, like Draymond, I'm a better basketball player than you. I have way more talent and I could be an NBA player. And his response was something along the lines of this. He said, yeah, sure, a lot of people could play in an NBA game, but most of them can't be NBA players. The game is the easy part of my job. The hard part is that every day when I wake up at 7 a.m., every single thing I do has to make sure that I show up on time for the game and in peak physical and mental shape so that I can go do what I need to do, right? Think about how many times during your day, like, do you screw up your day where, like, you're late for a meeting, you can't get to the gym, you don't eat right. And that would really resonate with me because I think the difference between I've seen like clients who've been successful in a transformation, people I know who've built businesses and been financially successful, people who've built great relationships with their spouse, people who have mastered a hobby, is the difference between getting where you want to go and not getting there really comes down to what he was explaining is every day when you wake up, you just have to make choices that make sure you do what you need to do, right? Like you make a decision when you get out of bed, are you going to get to the gym or are you not that day, right? And the series of decisions that you make are going to dictate whether you get there or not, right? Are you eating the right food you need to? It just comes down to simple decisions. Are you getting the right workouts you need to? Simple decisions. Are you avoiding making decisions that push you away from the actual goal at the end of the day? And those small decisions you have to make are actually determine whether you win your day or lose your day, and you stack those up over and over and over and over, and that becomes your life, right? So the series of small decisions you make in a given day, repeatedly, day after day, is what makes your life, right? So are you getting up on time? Are you showing up to work on time? Are you getting your to-do list done? Are you getting to gym? Like all those things that seem so small, that's what determines whether you get to where you want to go or where you don't. And so I think that's the first thing I wanted to talk about today is just make sure that when you make decisions, they're conducive to the goals that you've actually set in your life. The next one I want to talk about is it's about leadership, and I want to extend this to a couple different areas. So I think let's start with business. I'll just kind of give the business case. This applies to business. This applies to your personal relationships. And then if you're a coach or you're a manager and you're kind of directing people, I think this also applies. And it's leadership is way more about what you do than what you say, right? And I think about this in, let's talk the kind of the business level, right? this got brought up to me in a podcast I was listening to, but it was something I've been really thinking about, and it kind of just resonated and clicked, and I wanted to share it. Is if you're trying to build company culture, right? Company culture is kind of this like amorphous thing that's really hard to put a handle on, but it kind of stems from the core values that you have in your business, right? And so when I think about like Macros Inc., our kind of core values, we have them written down, but like really in essence, they are help people, be a good person, do the right thing, and be transparent, right? And trying to like tell people that's what we do, you can just say that, but that doesn't build culture, right? And what building culture is from the top down, you have to behave like that, right? If you're going to help people, you have to actually help people, right? Like you have to go out of your way, you have to take an extra meeting, you have to donate your time, you have to give back to the community, you have to just kind of do the extra work. You have to really go help people. If you want people in your organization to be a good human, you have to be a good human, right? And you have to be honest. You have to make the good decisions in your life, not just in business, right? Because if your personal life, you're not making good decisions, the people that work for you know that. And so that's been one of the really interesting things that I don't think I appreciated about leadership and kind of owning and kind of co-running a business is I've probably lived in that space for the last, let's call it 12, 13 years of my life, give or take a year or two, is whenever I make personal decisions of like what I do in my personal life, I've really had to put it through the lens of like, if my employees knew I was doing this with my life, is this a good decision, right? Like who I marry, where I live, the things that I do in my free time, what are my habits, what are my hobbies, how do I talk to people? Like I always have to put the lens of, are these the values I want to instill in the people that work for me? And if that's the case, then it's a good decision. If it's not, leadership really is more about what you say or what you do than what you say. And I see this, too with, my relationships with people, right? Like I can tell my wife, hey, I love you unconditionally. And like, I want to practice patience. I want to do all these things, but like, unless I actually do those things and act that out, it doesn't really matter much. And I think the same thing happens. Like if you're a coach listening to this kind of comes down to the argument of like, do you look the part as a coach, right? If you want your clients to emulate or do the things that you ask them to do, you need to be able to do those things as well, right? You can't tell your clients they need to do X, Y, and Z, but you live completely orthogonal to the advice you're giving. So that's number 2, right? First one is make decisions conducive to your goals. Number 2 is leadership is more about what you do than what you say. Number 3 today is in life, business, relationships, you're going to have to make a lot of decisions, right? Basically, everything comes down to making decisions. And what you need to do is whenever you've got a difficult decision, you have to just have a conviction, right? This is the direction I'm headed. And then decide if you're willing to deal with the negative that might happen from that decision and then move forward, right? You have to say, okay, here's the cost benefit. I'm willing to take the risk of just incurring full cost, right? I'm just going to eat it all in the face if I have to. Make that decision and move forward, because the longer that you sit in indecision, the longer you are delaying the potential outcome, right? The longer you delay the decision, sure, maybe you're delaying the cost that you're going to incur, but you're also delaying the benefit, right? You can't have one and not the other. So you have to make that decision. This really applies to kind of everything, right? Your life, your business, your relationships is don't sit in indecision longer than you need to, right? Take the time you need to make the decision that you need to make, but once you know it needs to be made, just do it. You're not only delaying the potential harm, but you're also delaying the potential positive. So make that decision and then start moving through all of it. This kind of goes down to the old story about cows versus buffaloes in the storms, right? When a storm is coming in, cows try to run away from the storm, right? But you can't really outrun the storm, so eventually you're running with it. So you end up in the storm longer, right? When the herd of buffaloes sees the storm, they run to it, because if they're running through the storm and the storm's coming at them, that time frame in which they're being rained on or the storm is occurring is actually shorter, because they just ran into it, dealt with it, and just moved through it. And then this brings me to my last point, because these things all kind of tie together, is thinking about doing the work is actually more stressful and anxiety inducing than just doing the work, right? Just kind of go back to like high school when you had your 3-page paper due, right? The days that you procrastinated and like dreaded writing it were actually way worse than the 2 hours it took you to just sit down and bang it out. Building your first business, right? The anxiety of thinking about doing it and doing the work and maybe failing is actually way worse than just getting up every day and spending 12 hours a day working and getting no's and getting rejections and learning. Like, the anxiety and the stress around thinking about it is actually way worse than just doing the work. And so just get to work, right? Get to work, have a conviction, make decisions, make sure that you are doing what you say you're going to do, because leadership is way more about what you do than what you say. And then the fourth thing is make sure that when you're making the decisions and you're doing the work, that those decisions are actually conducive to your goal. Because you have to make a decision. It's the same amount of energy to make either decision. Make the ones that push you on the right track. So let me know what you guys thought. I hope this is helpful. I hope it gives you some perspective. I hope maybe it just reminds you of some of the things that you already know. Feel free to leave some comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you found this helpful. Go ahead and subscribe. I'm Dr. Brad. I'll see you guys later.